The hiss of soda broke the silence before the splash even landed. Cold, sticky liquid cascaded across the conference table, spilling over a stack of reports and then onto her. Maya Thompson froze. Her silk blouse clung to her skin, the deep caramel color soaking through in uneven blotches. Around her, a dozen executives stared. Some looked shocked. Some looked entertained. And one, the man standing over her, wore a smirk sharp enough to cut glass. "Is that how you people always react?" said Greg Walters, Vice President of Operations at Novacor Industries, so emotional over a little accident. He leaned back, shaking the can as the last drops fizzed. The carbonation hissed between them like a warning. No one said a word. Maya felt the sting, not just of the soda, but of 3 long years of quiet humiliation. Every meeting, every idea stolen, every fake smile. But Greg didn't know he had just poured more than soda. He'd poured gasoline on a fire that had been waiting to burn. She reached for a napkin with calm precision, dabbing the mess from her blouse as if the insult didn't touch her. "Accidents happen," she said evenly. Her tone was soft. Her dignity was louder. Around the boardroom, her coworkers exchanged glances, confused, uneasy, guilty. Maya stood slowly, her wet sleeve brushing against her white portfolio, the one she had spent 17 nights perfecting. The one that now sagged under the weight of Greg's mistake. Greg waved a hand toward the HR rep sitting near the corner. "Lisa, you can clean that up," he said casually. "That's what you're here for, right?" The words landed like stones in water, rippling through the room. Everyone heard them. Everyone pretended not to. Maya's heart beat steady as she gathered her things. She wasn't going to give him the scene he wanted, because Greg Walters had made a crucial error that morning. The merger documents sitting on the CEO's desk were already signed. And the man walking through the lobby at that very moment, the man wearing a navy suit and a quiet expression, was about to rewrite everything Greg thought he controlled. The game beneath the surface, the 42nd floor of Novacor headquarters glittered with glass and ambition. From the wide windows, downtown Atlanta shimmered under the late morning sun, a skyline built on hustle and ego. Inside, 14 executives performed their daily dance of dominance. Maya Thompson, executive assistant, sat near the far end of the table. To them, she was background noise, a polite shadow who took notes and poured coffee. They didn't know the notes she took weren't just minutes. For 3 years, Maya had documented every slight, every time her ideas were stolen, every meeting where her name was accidentally left off the credits, every promotion denied without explanation. Her MBA from Princeton gathered dust in her apartment. Her father's framed blueprint for an energy converter, a design stolen decades ago by his white business partners, hung above her desk as a reminder of what silence costs. She had learned her father's lesson well. "Keep receipts, baby," he used to say. "The world won't believe your worth unless you prove it." So she did, quietly, methodically. While Greg Walters bragged about streamlining operations, Maya built spreadsheets that told a different story, one of inefficiency, favoritism, and fraud disguised as strategy. She waited, watched, and collected proof. And today, the day of the Zenith Tech merger, was her final move. The setup, the meeting started like any other. Laptops open, PowerPoints glowing, voices heavy with self-importance. Maya's portfolio sat neatly in her lap. Inside were charts showing how Novacor had lost over $2 million due to Greg's strategic shortcuts. Data that could end his career in one slide. When the CFO paused between slides, Maya lifted her chin. "Before we continue," she said calmly, "I've prepared a report that might address the revenue gaps in Division 4. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Greg turned in his chair, the practiced smirk already returning. "The assistant has thoughts on operations," he said, drawing out the word assistant. "Please, enlighten us." A few chuckles fluttered around the table. Maya stood anyway, placing her portfolio on the table. Her posture was impeccable, her voice steady. "The data identifies 3 inefficiencies that—" Greg cut her off, looking at his watch. "We're short on time. Maybe next week." "It'll take less than 5 minutes," she said, refusing to sit. 4 minutes too long," he replied. He picked up his soda again, and with deliberate slowness tipped it forward. The brown liquid ran down the table, across her documents, and onto her lap. Gasps filled the air. Greg smiled without smiling. Oops, clumsy me. The humiliation was complete, or so he thought. Maya's hand trembled for one brief second before steadying. She lifted a napkin and began to wipe the pages, each movement deliberate, measured, and calm. These things happen, she said softly, but in her eyes was something Greg didn't recognize. It wasn't anger. It was inevitability. The whisper of Justice Lisa from HR moved quickly, pretending to clean the mess, but her hand brushed against Maya's for just a second. Something small and cold slid into her palm, a black USB drive. Top drawer of his desk, Lisa whispered, her silver hair hiding her lips from the room's view. Everything you need. Their eyes met for a heartbeat, two women who had played the long game too long. Maya nodded once and excused herself to the restroom. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman soaked but unbroken. She pulled out the drive, feeling its weight. Years of buried complaints. Denied promotions. Hidden reports. It was proof, hard proof, that Greg's rise had been built on the backs of those he dismissed. The bathroom door creaked open. Voices echoed in, Greg's and the CFO's. She needed reminding, Greg said, turning on the faucet. Getting too confident lately. The CFO sighed. Still, that was unnecessary, Greg laughed. What's she going to do? File a complaint? You know how that goes. Their laughter bounced off the marble walls before fading. Maya waited until silence returned. Then she smiled faintly. Greg was right about one thing. She did know how complaints went. They went missing. But this time the complaint was sitting right in her hand. Maya returned to the boardroom, her steps quiet but certain. The smell of soda still lingered faintly in the air, sweet and sticky like arrogance left too long in the sun. Conversations hushed as she entered. A few people looked away, pretending to scroll through their laptops. Greg didn't look up at all. He thought it was over. He thought he had won. But the energy in the room shifted, subtle at first, like the quiet before a summer storm. The kind of quiet that makes people glance toward the windows without knowing why. Maya resumed her seat and folded her hands neatly in her lap. Her soaked blouse clung to her skin, but she didn't care. She wasn't there to be comfortable. She was there to finish what her father never could. The CFO droned on about quarterly margins, his voice filling the room without meaning. Around the table, executives nodded mechanically, already rehearsing how they would claim credit for someone else's ideas next week. Maya wasn't listening to him. She was listening to the ticking clock on the far wall. Each second carried her closer to the moment she had been preparing for. Her father's voice whispered from memory. Always keep receipts. Maya. People respect evidence more than truth, and evidence she now had in abundance. Her husband, Ethan Cole, had once told her the same thing. They met years ago at a technology summit. She was serving coffee. He was speaking on stage. He had been the only one to look her in the eye and say thank you, like it actually meant something. The conversation that followed outlasted the conference and eventually outlasted doubt. Ethan built Titan Industries from nothing but grit and brilliance. He understood power the way some people understand gravity. It was unseen but absolute. When she told him she wanted to work inside NovaCore, not as a consultant but from the ground up, he didn't question her. He only asked one thing. Do you want revenge or change? Change, she'd said. And that's why, months later, Titan Industries began quietly negotiating the purchase of NovaCore. Greg had no idea the assistant he bullied daily was married to the man buying his company out from under him. Now that plan had reached its final hour. The elevator chimed. The sound was crisp, echoing through the open hallway. The glass doors slid open and every conversation in the boardroom stopped mid-breath. A tall man stepped in. Charcoal suit, calm eyes. A presence that didn't demand attention but took it anyway. Ethan Cole didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. Silence made room for him naturally. Greg straightened, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Cole, he said, crossing the room with an extended hand. Welcome to NovaCore. We've been expecting your CFO for the acquisition meeting. Ethan regarded the handshake for a moment before accepting it. His voice was smooth, steady. Plans changed. I prefer to handle transitions personally when the investment is significant. Of course, Greg said, his laugh brittle. We've prepared everything for you. I'll be overseeing the operational side of integration myself. Ethan's eyes swept the room, pausing on Maya. For a second, no one else existed. Then he gave a brief nod. Good to know, Mr. Walters. Before we begin, I'd like Ms. Thompson to join us at the main table. The shift in tone was small but seismic. Greg blinked, confusion flickering. Ms. Thompson? He repeated. You mean our assistant? She can stay where she usually sits. She's here to take notes. Ethan didn't look at him. I was speaking to her, not you. The silence that followed was suffocating. Maya rose slowly, her every movement deliberate. The eyes of 14 executives followed her as she walked to the main table and took the empty chair beside Ethan. Greg's jaw tightened. The CFO swallowed audibly. No one dared to breathe too loud. Ethan opened his leather folder and slid a document toward Maya. Would you explain the terms of this agreement to your colleagues? The question hung in the air like a held breath. Greg let out a short laugh. Mr. Cole, with all respect, these are complicated financial arrangements. She might not. Ethan turned his gaze toward him, calm and unflinching. I trust her expertise. Something in his tone, quiet authority sharpened by absolute certainty, cut through the tension. Maya opened the folder. The company seal of Titan Industries gleamed at the top of the page. Beneath it were the signatures that finalized the acquisition. She looked up and spoke clearly. Effective as of this morning, Titan Industries has acquired a controlling interest in Novacor. I am here not as an assistant but as Executive Vice President of Strategic Integration. Gasps filled the room. Someone dropped a pen. Greg's smirk vanished like a shadow under light. Ethan leaned back, arms crossed loosely. Continue, he said softly. Maya stood. The soda stains on her blouse caught the overhead light, dark and undeniable. Under the new structure, there will be significant leadership changes. Accountability will be prioritized over tenure, merit over politics, and respect earned or lost will define every promotion from this point forward. Greg was pale now. This is absurd, he stammered. This isn't how mergers work. Oh, but it is, she said, eyes steady on him. Especially when your behavior becomes part of the acquisition review. The room was silent again, but this time, it wasn't submission. It was anticipation. The kind of silence that waits for justice. Ethan turned toward Greg. I heard about a soda incident this morning, he said. Care to elaborate? Greg laughed weakly. Just a small accident. Nothing important. I disagree, Ethan said. How leaders treat people in small moments says more than any quarterly report ever could. Maya's voice was calm. Perhaps Lisa can share her perspective. Lisa rose slowly, holding a folder. Actually, I can, she said. And not just about this morning. I've been documenting workplace misconduct for 3 years. Promotions denied, reports altered, complaints erased. All connected to Mr. Walters. Greg's face drained of color. That's ridiculous. You can't. Ethan held up a hand. You'll have time to respond. After you read the evidence, he opened the folder. Inside were pages of reports, emails, testimonies, all cataloged and verified. Every arrogant word, every stolen idea, every buried complaint. Greg's breathing quickened. His voice cracked. This is a setup. No, Ethan said quietly. This is consequence. The room sat frozen in the weight of truth. For the first time, Greg Walters had nothing to say. Maya glanced at him one last time. You mistook patience for weakness, she said softly. That's the last mistake you'll ever make here. Ethan's voice followed like a verdict. Mr. Walters, your employment with Novacor is terminated effective immediately. Security stepped forward. Chairs creaked. Papers rustled. Greg tried to speak, but words failed him. The hallway swallowed the sound of his footsteps as the doors closed behind him. The boardroom exhaled. The storm had passed, but the rebuilding was only beginning. The air in the boardroom was thick with silence, the kind that came only after something irreversible. No one moved. Every face around the table carried the same look, a mixture of disbelief and fragile relief. It was as if the whole room had been holding its breath for 3 years and finally remembered how to exhale. Maya stood still, her hand resting lightly on the edge of the table. The weight of what had just happened hadn't fully landed yet. Greg's empty chair sat like an open wound at the head of the room, a symbol of arrogance finally removed. Ethan glanced toward Lisa. Continue, he said quietly. Lisa nodded, opening another folder. In addition to the misconduct reports, we've documented 17 cases where credit for major projects was reassigned to senior executives without justification. In nearly every instance, those projects originated from employees of color or women in technical roles. A few heads lowered. No one interrupted. Maya listened, her heart steady, but her mind racing back through every late night, every hushed conversation, every stolen idea she'd watched rebranded under someone else's name. She wasn't imagining it then. None of them had been imagining it. Lisa placed the final document on the table. This pattern is consistent and undeniable. The company's culture has been rewarding appearance over performance. That ends today. Ethan closed the folder. Thank you, Lisa. His voice was calm, but his words carried weight. Effective immediately, your role will expand. You'll oversee organizational ethics and personnel operations. It's time people like you shape what this company becomes. The words hit like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Lisa's eyes widened. For a brief moment, her professionalism faltered, and she blinked hard to keep her composure. Thank you, Mr. Cole, she said softly. Ethan turned to the rest of the room. There are going to be changes, fair ones. We're not here to erase, but to rebuild. Some roles will evolve, others will be dissolved. But from this point forward, promotion will mean something again. He looked to Maya. You'll help oversee that process. Maya nodded, meeting his eyes for a moment that spoke more than words. It wasn't triumph she felt. It was clarity. Ethan began reading names from a list. People who had been silenced, overlooked, or dismissed. Sarah Lee, head of client relations. Your work increased retention by 23%. You're now chief operations officer. Sarah gasped quietly, covering her mouth. She looked down, her fingers trembling. Marcus Rivera, Ethan continued. Your technical designs have driven innovation for 2 years without recognition. You'll lead research and development effective immediately. Marcus blinked as if afraid it was a mistake. Ethan's gaze moved to another face. Darya Nguyen, your financial analysis saved this company millions. You'll oversee strategic finance. Each name reshaped the room's energy, erasing the tension left by Greg's toxic shadow. It was like watching light fill a space that had been dark for too long. For every new appointment, there was a soft murmur of disbelief, and then quiet applause. No one cheered. They didn't need to. The sound of fairness was powerful enough. Finally, Ethan turned to Maxwell Kane, the company's longtime CEO. The man had been silent through it all, fingers laced tightly in front of him, eyes fixed on the table. Mr. Kane, Ethan said evenly, you were aware of much of this, weren't you? Kane looked up slowly. His voice was brittle. I thought handling it quietly would protect the company. It protected the wrong people, Ethan replied. We'll discuss your transition privately. For now, consider this your last board meeting as acting CEO. No one was surprised. Some even looked relieved. When Ethan finished speaking, he turned toward Maya once more. You know these systems better than anyone. Help me rebuild them. Maya exhaled slowly, letting the words sink in. She had spent years documenting problems. Now she was being asked to design solutions. As the meeting ended, security escorted Greg's belongings out of the building. Each thud of a box hitting the elevator floor echoed through the marble lobby. The digital clock on the wall flickered 3:07 p.m., the exact minute his access card deactivated. Maya lingered in the boardroom as everyone else left. The room smelled faintly of paper and soda. She looked at the table where the spill had dried into a faint, sticky ring. For a long moment, she just stared at it. Then she reached for a cloth, wiped it clean, and smiled. Ethan came to stand beside her. You know, he said quietly, that stain could have stayed as a reminder. Maya looked up at him. It's not the stain that matters. It's the person who cleaned it. Outside the glass walls, the city glowed gold in the late afternoon light. The hum of traffic, the endless motion, it all seemed different now, as if the world itself had tilted ever so slightly toward balance. Change had begun, but the real transformation was still coming. Because while one man's downfall had made noise, the rebuilding of a culture would speak in quieter ways, through fairness, credit given where it was due, and respect that no longer needed defending. The storm was over. The rebuild had begun. 3 weeks passed, but the memory of that day lingered like electricity in the walls of Novacor. The building was the same, the glass panels, the chrome fixtures, the smell of coffee and ambition. But something fundamental had shifted. The quiet fear that used to live in the hallways had vanished. In its place was a current of purpose, steady and alive. Maya stood by the window of her new office on the 42nd floor. It was the corner suite that once belonged to Greg. She hadn't redecorated much. The same sleek desk, the same view over downtown Atlanta. But the energy felt unrecognizable. Where Greg once barked orders, she held conversations. Where his meetings had been performances, hers were collaborations. The skyline glittered beneath the morning sun, every beam of light reflecting off glass towers like signals of renewal. From up here, the city looked organized, alive, intentional. She saw it as an ecosystem, each street, each person, each decision connected to something larger. NovaCore, for all its past flaws, was part of that system too, and under her hand it was beginning to heal. A knock sounded at her door. It opened to reveal Ethan carrying 2 coffees. He placed one on her desk. "Still take it with cinnamon?" he asked. "Some things shouldn't change," she said, smiling. He stood beside her, looking out the window. "You've been busy." "Busy's an understatement," she replied. "The restructuring report came in this morning. Department productivity's up 28%. Retention's up nearly 30%. And morale." She paused, searching for the right word. "It's honest now." Ethan nodded, pleased but unsurprised. "You didn't just change a company. You changed the rhythm it beats to." Maya turned back to her desk. Among the neat stacks of reports was a framed photograph of her father, smiling from behind a cluttered workbench, his hands darkened with solder and determination. Beside it, a glass case held one of his old prototype circuits, small and gleaming. "He always said dignity speaks softly," she murmured, "but it leaves echoes." Ethan followed her gaze. "He'd be proud, you know." Maya smiled faintly. "He taught me how to wait without losing sight of the goal. I think that's what patience really is. Not standing still, but preparing while the world catches up." Across the open office floor beyond her glass walls, the transformation was visible. Meetings were shorter and more focused. Collaboration boards overflowed with ideas that actually had names attached to them. Sarah, now COO, stood at a digital whiteboard reviewing strategies with her team. Every person in that room spoke freely, without looking over their shoulder. Marcus and Daria were across the hall, deep in discussion over the new product roadmap. Every time someone passed by, there were smiles, real ones, not the brittle kind that used to hide fear. Lisa was building the new ethics department, mentoring young analysts with the same patience that once kept her silent. Maya watched it all like a conductor listening to the orchestra she'd once been forbidden to join. Ethan broke the silence. "Heard from Walter's attorney?" She nodded once. "They reviewed the documentation and decided not to pursue anything. Too much evidence." "Not surprised," Ethan said. "Documentation doesn't just tell the truth, it protects it." Maya let out a slow breath. "Maxwell Kane signed his retirement papers last week. He's taking partial accountability in his exit statement. It's not redemption, but it's a start." "Closure takes many shapes," Ethan said. She smiled at that, but her mind drifted to something deeper. "It's strange," she said softly. "After everything, I don't feel victorious. Just balanced, like a scale that finally stopped shaking." "That's what justice feels like," Ethan replied. "It's quieter than people imagine." The rest of the day unfolded in motion. Meetings, reports, plans, laughter echoing in places that once knew only tension. But under it all ran a steady pulse of change, a rhythm Maya could feel in her chest. Before leaving that evening, she paused again at the window. The city was different now, not because the skyline had changed, but because she had. She thought about her father, about the years he spent being told his ideas weren't good enough. She thought about every woman and every quiet worker whose voice had been ignored. They were all part of this moment. For the first time, NovaCore wasn't a company built on hierarchy and fear. It was a living testament to something stronger: evidence, persistence, and grace under fire. Maya switched off the lights and walked out of her office, her reflection fading into the glass. The world outside kept moving, but she walked with the calm certainty of someone who no longer needed to prove her worth. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges. But tonight, dignity had the last word. The next morning began with a quiet anticipation that ran through the 42nd floor like a current waiting to surge. The executive meeting was scheduled for 9 sharp, and everyone was early. There was no nervous chatter, no forced smiles. Just the low hum of people who finally believed their work mattered. Maya walked into the boardroom, the same room where Greg had poured his soda weeks before. The table gleamed under the morning light. There was no trace of the past insult, only the reflection of faces ready for something new. As she took her seat at the head of the table, every eye turned toward her. No one missed the symbolism. The same spot that had once belonged to arrogance was now occupied by calm authority. Ethan sat beside her, silent but present. This wasn't his meeting to lead. It was hers. Maya looked around the room and smiled softly. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to acknowledge what this room used to represent. Power was measured by who could speak the loudest, not who had the best ideas. But that ends today." The words landed with quiet weight. No one moved. They didn't have to. Everyone understood. She continued, her tone steady but warm. "Respect isn't a favor, it's a standard. Merit isn't defined by a title, it's defined by contribution and leadership." She paused, looking toward Sarah, Marcus, and Daria. "Leadership isn't about control. It's about trust." Sarah nodded slightly, her eyes bright. Daria folded her hands, leaning forward with quiet pride. "Every person in this company," Maya said, "deserves to be seen. That's how we'll move forward. From visibility, not invisibility. From accountability, not politics." Ethan watched her, a faint smile on his face. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was personal. The timid assistant he once saw in the corner had become the voice that redefined an empire. "Now," Maya said, opening her folder, "let's talk about the future." The next hour flowed like music. Sarah outlined her operational plan, a structure that gave every department equal input. Marcus presented a new innovation model that credited contributors openly. Daria walked through financial projections that reflected a culture of transparency. There were no interruptions, no condescending comments, no one speaking over anyone else. The room moved like a single mind made up of many voices. When the final slide faded from the screen, Maya closed her notebook. "This is what progress looks like," she said. "Not perfect, not easy, but honest." For a moment, the only sound was the faint buzz of the city far below. Then Ethan spoke. "You've done something rare," he said. "You've proven that power doesn't have to shout to be heard." Maya smiled. "That's because real power listens." The meeting adjourned, but no one rushed out. People lingered, talking in small groups, exchanging ideas, laughter, and even gratitude. It felt like the beginning of something that would last. As the room slowly emptied, Maya stayed behind. She walked to the far end of the table, where the sunlight touched the polished surface, and laid her hand flat against it. The glass was cool beneath her palm, but steady, solid. She thought of her father again, his tired eyes, his quiet hands, his faith that truth would someday rise. She had carried his legacy through silence, through indignity, through the long nights of planning and waiting. And now, standing here, she realized she hadn't just avenged him. She had fulfilled him. Ethan stepped beside her, watching her reflection in the glass. "You built something they can't take away this time," he said. She nodded, eyes still on the skyline. "Because I built it in the open." He took her hand just briefly as the morning light spread across the floor. "What will you call it?" he asked. Maya thought for a moment. "Balance," she said. "That's all I ever wanted." They left the room together, the door closing softly behind them. The sound wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Down the hall, laughter echoed from a nearby office. Someone had cracked a joke during a team briefing. The walls of Novacor, once heavy with tension, now carried warmth instead. The elevator doors opened. As they stepped inside, Maya looked back one last time. The boardroom glowed under the sunlight. No stains, no shadows, just clear reflection. Justice hadn't arrived in anger or noise. It had arrived through patience, proof, and grace. And in that quiet moment, as the elevator began to descend, Maya understood something her father had tried to teach her all those years ago. Power doesn't come from being heard. It comes from never being silenced again. The doors closed. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation, the rebuilding of worth, one documented truth at a time. And from that day on, Novacor stood not as a monument to arrogance, but as a living reminder of what happens when dignity finally takes its rightful place at the head of the table